Welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week, where you join your two therapist best friends. Today, we have a third best friend who's going to join us and talk about all things therapy, mental health, and all that good jazz. I am Dee. We are joined also by DJ. If you want to say hi, DJ.
Hey, everybody.
And we are joined by our amazing and wonderful friend, Lianna. Welcome, Lianna.
Hey, thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. We've talked about having folks on to talk about areas that they're really passionate about or things that they know a lot about. And so, yeah, you were lucky, or you were kind enough to not put the caveat of I will not be your first guest, unlike another one of our friends who's listening probably. So today we want to talk a little bit. So first off, well, actually, Lianna, I'll toss over to you if you want to talk about who you are, what you do. DJ and I've talked a lot about what the heck we do. So if you want to share.
Sure. So I am a school counselor. I work with students in kindergarten to fifth grade. This school year is my 10th year as a school counselor. I am finishing up my 6th year in the district that I am in right now.
That is awesome. You made me feel like, oh God, it's been 10 years.
I know.
It's been such a long time. So I think like there's a common misconception about what a school counselor actually is. Can you enlighten us a bit?
Sure. How do I even start? So obviously, many of you have probably heard the term guidance counselor. So that is kind of, I guess, what our role has previously been known as. And we still get called that. Even though it was like early 2000s when the name change actually happened in the law. So it's been like over 20 years since our title has been changed. So when you think about like old school guidance counselors, they were the people in high schools who sat at their desk and like made sure you had the credits to graduate, right? And helped you like choose a career path or what college you were going to go to. And that was like the extent of what they did. But now as school counselors, we do that obviously, but a whole ton more. And first of all, we have a lot more training. So we're mental health professionals. Like I'm not a mental health counselor, but we have almost identical training as you guys, minus a few classes. And then, our goal as school counselors is to help kids emotionally, socially, academically, and with career. So it's not just that career academic piece, it's social emotional as well. And in the K-5 world, the elementary world that I live in, that's like our 80% of our focus, right, is social emotional, because we're not earning credits. We're not, we do talk a little bit about careers, but our focus is that like social emotional piece. Some of you may have heard the term SEL, which is social emotional learning, which is pretty big in like the educational world. So even like with teachers, they want them teaching these social emotional skills. But that is, kind of our focus as school counselors at the elementary level. And then it's also because we are, mental health professionals still, like we are, more trained to look out for, when referrals might need to be made to outside agencies and stuff like that for mental health struggles. So, yeah.
So you have to wear a lot of hats.
Yes. And so, so not only, am I doing that, which is my main job, but, we're in the lunchroom opening pudding, like we are, saying good morning in the mornings. Like we are a huge part of like making the school environment welcoming, and making sure everybody feels welcome, and know that they have a safe place in our buildings. Right. And we can just be another trusted adult for all kids. So yeah, lots of hats.
That's awesome though. I think like the question was posed to me the other day and was like, what's like a class or something you wish they taught in school? Like when like I was in school, which I'm not that old, I'm 32. So it wasn't that long ago. But I like the first things that came to mind is like if someone like taught us about like, I don't know, taxes, that would have been sweet. I think that a lot of people would benefit if they just had like like life skills, like almost like was it home ec was like a version of it, but also just like life skills. Like how do you get by in life? How do you be a critical thinker, which is like a lot of what a lot of teaching is supposed to teach you about, but also mental health and social and emotional. Like I don't remember ever learning anything about it that was like a concrete, like, here's how you process what you've been through. And like our kids have gone through a lot. Like, I don't know. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would, there's a lot that I could say on that, but like, I work in a building where there's over 1,000 kids,
That's
and
so many germs.
it is a lot,
Ugh.
a lot of germs.
I don't mean the children. I mean the germs that they bring. I mean like the kids like a little bit,
Well,
but like,
well,
you know.
yeah, but there are so many that, have been through so many things that I can't even imagine, even as a well-functioning, well-adapted adult, and they're 5, 6, 7, like going through even more than I can even imagine what that's like. So, so many of them, I mean, it's sad, and not all of them certainly, but so many, for circumstances outside of their control, like school is their safe place. They come to school to get food, to be
Mm-hmm.
loved, like to have an adult say something positive to them for the first time, So it's a lot and it's sad, but we have a lot of opportunities to make a difference in kids' lives.
Yeah. What an amazing responsibility and like privilege that is. I mean, I always think it's like a privilege to work with people and to step into their lives and to be like a part of it. Like, what a cool thing. And so to do that with like the littles is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, so my first district that I worked in, we had a kindergartner. I won't make this story super long, but this kindergartner was struggling like big time, and he was just having such a hard time adapting, and like would get kind of physical at school sometimes, and just a lot. And the school resource officer that I worked with when I was in that district had reached out to me just like a year or two ago and was like, "Hey, remember so and so?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" And they're like, "Well, they're in 9th grade now, and they were asking about you." And I was like, "What?" Like, that's crazy, So that's really cool when, like, for a kid that I hadn't seen in 6 years and that I knew from kindergarten to 2nd grade, like, was asking about me, you know?
That's
Um,
awesome.
like, that's really cool. And that's a great feeling. Yeah.
Do you guys remember the name of like the people, like the teachers and like helping professionals in like your elementary schools? Like,
I
can you
don't,
name
I
like your 2nd grade teacher or like your principal and
Yeah, the earliest I can name is my 4th grade teacher. And
mm,
honestly, that's probably only because I had a yearbook. Like, I think if I didn't have that, 5th grade might have been my earliest. But like, I don't even know if I had a counselor at the elementary level, which, you know, 24 years ago, whatever, now, like that wasn't much of a thing. Again, they were more like in high school, so I could have not had one. But if I did, I don't remember them.
I had school
DJ, do you
counselors
remember
when I
yours?
was, yeah, I had school counselors when I was in school, and I know I was there like 20 years before you guys were. And I remember I moved around schools a lot when I was a kid, but I remember all of my teachers, and some years I had too, different at different schools. But yeah, I think that like the school counselors, I remember even in high school just being like the more people that you felt like were kind of like advocating for you. Um, so I think that's like an important role. And I don't think I had a school counselor like when my dad died when I was in 6th grade. But like I think having someone in the school that you would have a relationship with would make something like that, a good place to talk to someone instead of like going to a new person outside of the school, having someone at least inside the school to that you already had a relationship with. So I think that's really important. I'm glad that we have more in schools now.
Well, I mean, some kids don't get to go to that outside school place, right? Like, so it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
this may be, even if that person's advocating for you and
Hmm.
saying, this a student needs more, like that may be all you get.
Right.
That's something that I like, you know, just as you said, like some kids don't have the opportunity and aren't able to get that outside additional. And like, yes, for example, for grief, like, especially if it's, something long term, that is outside of my scope of practice and I would refer them. But if a kid doesn't have that opportunity and they just need a safe person, like I'm not literally doing therapy in the school, right? Like a lot of the kids that I see on a consistent basis are, we're really like solution focused. And, a lot of times it's not I mean, gosh, at most like 5 times for the same thing, granted a lot of kids I see a whole lot more than 5 times, but it's all kinds of different things, but for the same problem, like I'm not doing therapy, but when they don't have that opportunity, like sometimes they just need that safe person,
Right.
and they just need somebody that they know that they can
Right.
go to.
Right. And if it's someone they already have a relationship with or familiar with, someone that they've seen around the school before, and to have some rapport with already.
It's such a cool asset because, like, I think so. Like in the therapy world, right? There's a million different types of groups. I think sometimes people just hear group and they either think of like a mutual help group, like an AA or NA, or they think of like therapy where you all sit in a circle and it's like, welcome everybody. We have a new face joining us tonight. And like, don't get me wrong, I've led those groups before, but like there's like processing oriented groups where you're there to talk about a certain topic and to process through those emotions. But then there's more solution focused groups. So you're there to like learn, they're learning engagement type groups. Cause a lot of school counselors do some groups, right? But they're like, let's learn about these things.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, running small groups is a main part of my job. So another acronym in the school world is MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support. So
Sounds fancy.
so fancy. So it's kind of, I mean, it's developed from like the RTI process. So if you've ever heard of RTI, which is response to intervention. So basically like, 15 years ago, if a kid was struggling with reading, like, the district is going to say, okay, we're going to put title supports in place, which title is like reading tutoring, right? So we're going to put this focused intervention for reading in place. And then, okay, we're going to monitor their progress, right? And if they don't get better, okay, then here's what we're going to do. Here's the next layer, right? And eventually that could lead up to like being tested for, to make sure that interventions for academics were focused and we monitored their progress and all that. So now that has kind of evolved into MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support. So it's still focusing on monitoring academics and putting specific interventions in place, but you're also looking at the social emotional piece too. So we're not just saying so-and-so struggles with reading. It could be that someone is brought up to, this MTSS team because they struggle emotionally or socially. Like they, struggle to solve problems, their peer interactions aren't great, like whatever that is. And so our small groups come from that process. So, we might have a handful of kiddos who struggle with coping skills, right? And they just get too overwhelmed with their emotions and they don't know what to do with that. So we directly teach, here are coping skills that you can use and we're going to practice them together. And they learn from each other, just like in groups that you guys would run, right? In the past, I've done like family change groups where kids are either going through divorce or whatever, that might look like in their house, basically, I mean, really anything like friendship groups, like we're all going to learn how to make and keep friends, literally anything.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, that is a main part of my job.
So you said you've been doing this, 10 years. And so obviously some of the stuff has been going on like longer than that, but the world just continues to evolve. And I think becomes more mental health aware and more mental health focused, which I think is absolutely amazing. Like, just that people are starting to recognize like mental health is the core of everything. Do you think like part of the changing climate as a world is because these kids who've experienced these types of school counselors growing up and experiencing these types of things are now growing? I think of like, so Gen Z is one of the most mental health minded generations to date, right? They're very much mental health focused. They're the ones, I mean, the oldest right now are 27, I think is the cutoff for them. So they went to school during these times where we had school counselors really focused on these things. Do you think that that's a part, and really open question to you both, do you think that that's a reason why the world is kind of changing our ideas around mental health?
I don't know. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, honestly, is COVID. And we did start to see, I definitely think there was a shift before that too. But at least for the school side of things, since COVID, the mental health needs of our kids have just skyrocketed. And I think that stems from all kinds of things, whether it be like, our current third graders spent their kindergarten year of school online. Like, what
What do you
5-year-old is
do?
going to learn how to interact in a classroom from sitting on a computer screen,
Mhm.
or interact with other kids, or learn to regulate their emotions when they're just at home with whoever, you know what I mean? Like, they're not in a
Mhm.
classroom with 25 kids. There's not other kids trying to take their toys, like whatever it is. So whether it be that or just the experiences that, people in their household or their caregivers have had through the pandemic, like, I just think that that was like a really big thing
Mhm.
that has affected like our younger kids, and then you think of like, okay, our kids in kindergarten that were 1 when the pandemic happened, like, they weren't out getting the experiences that other 1-year-olds might have, right? Like, they were at home isolated. So I think just like in terms of development, that has impacted a lot as well. So that's kind of, I guess, what I see in terms of like mental health awareness and like the needs that we see in like elementary schools right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Lianna. Like, I think COVID did change, stigma on mental health, like all the way around. I know at the beginning of the lockdowns, I was thinking about the impact that being away from people would have on everybody, kids at school, people who are used to going to work, like everybody was like so isolated. And while we're talking about physical health, I was like, nobody's going to think about the impact that these lockdowns are having on everyone's mental health and are people in recovery, especially early recovery from like addiction, and I just thought like how bad everything was going to be and that nobody was going to talk about it. And I was surprised to see that like actually that was a central focus during COVID was mental health and hey, is everybody doing okay? But also what I noticed and and I know some people who are teachers, and I wonder, it seems like that some teachers don't have a lot of patience for the changes that happened in kids from, they're like, kids weren't like this before COVID, and I've actually had some people like on my caseload that have talked about like, how that impact would be, for kids like who were used to going to school and socializing and being able to get out of the house and being able to have those opportunities. And now like all that stuff was taken away. Like, of course, kids are coming back different. And, it's not going to be as quick as adjustment back to school than it would be for like someone who is adjusting for the first time to school. So I think I'm glad that like, the school councils are there and talking about those differences and the impact on kids as well, because they need that support.
Actually, interestingly enough, I love all of these points too. And interestingly enough, because we did highlight so much of mental health during COVID, I was just looking at the updated numbers for completed suicides in the United States. Super lighthearted topic. The number of completed suicides decreased in 2020 relatively significantly, enough to say like that's of statistical significance. And obviously, it's very difficult to show causation, right? Especially in real world research. But a lot of people are connecting it to there's so many like resources. It was in your face. Like it was in your face of here's where you get resources. Here's why your mental health matters. Here's like access to telehealth and things like that. Like I've worked in rural areas of Ohio a long time, and it always was really difficult for people who live out in the middle of nowhere. Like, how are they going to get in town to go to a meeting? They might have to walk literally 2 hours to get there if they don't have a transport, like don't have a car. And now like there was just a huge push of like, oh yeah, there's In the Rooms. You can just go to In the Rooms' website, and type in whatever meeting or time or whatever you're interested in and go to it, right? There's access for all of these things. And I think that that was a huge shift. So it's interesting to hear how that affected schools, because you both have training and working with children and in the schools. I do not. I kind of run away from schools actively. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say too, like, I think that's another big reason for the SEL, social emotional learning push, is that, with all of this, it's been recognized that like we have to directly teach these skills. If a kid is struggling to read, you're not going to put them in a room with a book and say you're in timeout and that's going to teach them to read. right? Like we have to teach them and like reteach the skills. And it's the same with social emotional, skills that like if they don't know it or don't get it right, like we have to teach and reteach and reteach. It's not just, you know, go to your room and then you'll do it differently next time. Because you don't know what that is, right? And teachers have a lot on their plate, like a lot, and so it is another thing that they're like, okay, this is something else I have to teach. But the goal is that like, okay, but if you teach this, you're going to get more time teaching your academics because the kids are going to know and understand and know how to act in situations and all that stuff and problem solve and blah blah blah. So like you put the time in to gain more time is the idea, right? But yeah, I mean it's a lot, and we definitely have to do that just like we would for reading or math.
Back when I was in school back in the dark ages. But I was definitely an ADHD kid, undiagnosed, because like nobody talked about ADHD when I was in school. And I still, all these years later, like have an emotional reaction to the way that the teachers like dealt with me being disruptive in classes, like being kicked out and having to go into the hallway. I remember my first grade teacher, we had something called monkey tickets, and she would take them away if you did something bad in class. And we got 5 every day, and almost every day I would get all of mine taken away. And if you got 5 taken away, you didn't get recess. So I spent like so much of my first grade year like not getting recess because I was like disruptive in class. I remember getting kicked out of my music class for like, clapping off tempo or too fast or like that kind of stuff. I remember in 8th grade in my science class being moved, asked to move from my desk and sit on the other side of the sink in the middle of the classroom, like in front of everybody. Like those were ways that like I was told, and like I said, those things have stuck through me. And my freshman year of high school, I got kicked out of my health class. As soon as I opened my mouth, she was like, "You're disruptive, go to the office." What I'm wondering is, I did my school counseling internship, and this wasn't something that we did, was teacher education. But I'm wondering if there's anything that happens or anything that you help moderate for teachers to know, like how do you support an ADHD kid so that they're not 50 years old and still have these memories of how they weren't supported in elementary or all the way through to school.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I would say that like in most classrooms, that is not the case. Like, I mean, you come in to at least the building that I work. Like there's flexible seating. We have a few desks, like traditional desks, but then we have tables that some that are low, some that are high. So there's like low chairs, there's high chairs. We have wobbly stools where the kids literally sit on the stool and they can like wiggle. We have some kids that sit on exercise balls. There are plenty of seats that have bands around like either chair legs or the table legs so the kids can like move their feet. I would say probably at least 3/4 of our classrooms have like calm down corners or calm down areas. Many of them have baskets of fidgets or like posters that like show, calming strategies. There are a lot, not a ton, but there are quite a few kiddos who are on Section 504 plans for ADHD, which is a civil rights thing, right? So Section 504 is a civil rights law that states that you can't discriminate anybody, right, for a disability. And so having ADHD can qualify as having a disability if it impacts their ability to learn and access the curriculum. So, a lot of the things that I stated, like wobble stools or bands or break areas, are accommodations that are written into those plans. So that's literally a formal document that a teacher legally has to follow and offer those things. And if they don't, I mean, they can be sued. Um, And then that also comes with like testing accommodations. So like extra time, frequent breaks, or like you get a 5-minute break after every 20 minutes of work. All that good stuff, like testing in a small group environment so you're not in the whole classroom. Like there's a lot. I don't specifically do any PD on ADHD specifically.
Describe
But our
PD.
Oh, sorry. PD is professional development.
Thanks.
So as teachers, like PD professional development days are built into our calendar, our school year. So our district, our teachers have, I believe, 3 PD days, at least this year, where we have to attend sessions to learn about different things. And whether it be like social emotional types of things, or, there could be sessions on helping kids with strategies with these types of things. So, I would say it definitely isn't anymore like, it certainly happens sometimes, and teachers are human, right? And sometimes they lose their patience or they need a minute. But it's definitely not like you're being disruptive, you need to leave. It's what can we do to change, right? Like your environment in here to make you successful. So
That's great.
I'm still mind blown at the fact that like it'll help a behavioral issue to remove recess. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Well, that has been a thing for a long time, and we still have quite a few teachers that believe they feel they need, or that should be taken away. But especially for our younger kids, like you have an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old or whatever that has ADHD, like they need that recess, they need to go move.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so that has been a big push. Our my current administration has even, gone so far to say, like, you're not allowed to take away the whole recess. Like, if you want to
Good.
take away a few minutes, okay, but you can't take the whole thing. So, I think things are changing. It takes time because, of course, teachers, like, there are teachers that have been doing this for a long time, and I respect them. But kids have changed, and a lot of them do great at adapting and changing and learning, but yeah.
Here's what I love about that. So like one of the things you said was about how like these kind of what we call accommodations, right? But these different ways to engage in the classroom is becoming common even without a 504, right? So the 504 obviously legally protects a kid's ability to access these things. But like my baby sister is a kindergarten teacher. This year was her first year. So super exciting. But she has some of these things in her classroom that you described too. And I think about like, how even like as a director, I've implemented a lot of these in the workplace, but like something as simple as an accommodation of literally the lighting, your seating, the ability to touch and engage with things, the ability to stand and move is huge when it comes to not just like behavior modification, but engagement. Like engagement in learning isn't sitting still, looking straight ahead at the board and, whatever. Like it can be so many other things. And it breaks down to me like what the term disability is. So you're only as disabled, right? Air quotes, as your environment. So for example, me going up a flight of stairs, not a disability, right? I can do that. So imagine like tomorrow, everyone else in the world besides us 3 wakes up and has wings. They literally can fly everywhere. Are the 3 of us disabled? No, right? We just don't have this like really cool power everyone else does, right? But if they get rid of stairwells and they get rid of elevators and they just have open shafts that people can just fly up to the next level, suddenly now we have a disability. Our abilities didn't change, the world did, right? So it's the same thing of like these things that we don't always think about. So it's not necessarily a disability to need to get up and to walk around, right? So I think, Lianna, you even hesitated when you talked about like ADHD is technically considered a disability because we don't really look at it that way. It's more of like that's just a way of engaging with the world, but doing certain things, certain accommodations make all the difference in the world for kids, whether they have a diagnosis or not a diagnosis.
Yeah. So I have a couple things. So one, like you said, the things that I just mentioned are becoming, just commonplace, right? That's just what you see in classrooms and how you see teachers, supporting their kids. That's just normal. It's becoming much more normal now. And a lot of times when I write 504 plans, like I'm literally just putting in writing what the teachers are already doing, and that doesn't change what they're doing. One thing it does do is that when they move on to the next grade level, that teacher can say, okay, they need this, 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 and this, and they'll be good. Like, so it does eliminate some of that, like, what do we need to do? You know, some of that like trial types of things. And of course, the needs can change as well, but you know, you already have that foundation. But, oh, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, I was going to say that's also very similar to even just the way that like we're assessing kids and the way we're teaching kids is also changing as well. So our district is really into personalized learning, which I'll explain in a minute, and PBL, which is project-based learning. So it's not like if you're walking around our building, it's very rare that you're going to see everybody at their desk looking up, taking notes. Like they're not doing that. Like they're moving around anyways. They're, you know, like engaging and working together. So personalized learning is very much like we're going to teach this concept, and then there's all these different ways that you can show us that you know it, right? Like, and you can do whichever one is interesting to you. And so there is a lot of, you know, changes like in education that are working to like support an individual, because we all don't learn the same. And not everybody is going to be successful by doing the exact same thing. And so just giving opportunities to all kids, you know, to show what they know in whatever way that is good for them. And that is also interesting because we have even more standardized tests than ever before as well. But that's that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, I think that education, like sometimes the people in education, teachers get like kind of the brunt of like people's complaints or whatever. But like, there's a lot of things that are out of their control, and a lot of things that come from the government, and a lot of decisions that are made from people who've never even been in a school, like as an adult, you know, working, which again is a whole nother conversation. But there are good things happening, you know, and so many teachers have, you know, just, I mean, all teachers, to do what they do, have hearts of gold, and they just want to help, you know, help kids. So
DJ's been so quiet. I don't know if you're still on mute for a purpose or just like you don't want to
I was still
be
on
our
mute.
friend anymore.
That's great. I think, you know, I like Lianna hearing about the way that things seem to have even evolved since, you know, I did my internship. And you know, granted, was just at one school district, but I was at a high school and elementary school. But you know, in 10 years, like I didn't see any talk about those, you know, the different adaptions for how lessons are taught so that kids can learn in the way that's most comfortable for them. Like that seems like something that's pretty new, but it should have been around, you know, always.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think like I wonder if there's been any like empirical to look at, like, has that changed overall behavior in the classroom? But then again, we define behavior in the classroom different now, and there's different resources for kids. Cause I just think about like, I mean, what an awesome, I even think of like, I don't know, that the rate that we diagnose individuals with autism, which is like a hugely controversial topic for some strange reason. But it's like a
Right.
lot of the kids that like that are adults now that got missed, having the classroom availabilities like everyone else would have, even without diagnosis, put them on a little bit more of a level playing field in a lot of ways.
and I think
Right.
like it would be cool if there was a study that could show like that this has caused behaviors to decrease or whatever. But I think there are just also so many other factors that impact behavior, from, you know, demographics and like your, you know, income levels to like your home background to your location in the country, like to the stuff that's in our food, like literally so many things that impact behavior in general. that I think would be impossible to like pinpoint. Like, yes, this wobble stool changed the behavior in our classroom over 15
What do
years,
you what do you mean we can't make correlation equal causation?
I feel,
right?
Come
I
on.
feel like you. I feel like you could. I feel like you could do some research on that, though. Probably a quantitative. Probably a quantitative. You can even do. I mean, my dissertation is a phenomenological study, and that's about lived experience, right? You could even do like lived experience of kids who have grown up with those accommodations and kids who didn't. I bet you could get some good information. Maybe not draw a causation, but you could get some good information
DJ,
about,
are you
the impact.
are you going to do a second dissertation, or are you signing Lianna up for a PhD program? Like, which was happening with
Oh,
that suggestion?
Leanna should do a PhD. Yeah.
I think she signed me up already.
Yeah.
PhDs are easy stuff, Leanna. It doesn't take any time. Dissertations, easy.
DJ, how long have you been
Total
working on
sarcasm.
this?
I went into my PhD and thought I was going to get it done in 2 years, and I'm at year 5, and hopefully I'll be done in June. But it's a lot of work, that's for sure.
Fingers crossed for you,
Yeah,
friend.
thanks.
But I mean, it is so hard to say because like the world is a different place. So even like all those factors Lianna talked about, but like I even think of, again, I'm thinking back to this article I read, and for those who were listening, DJ and I talked briefly about the Gen Z on American Counseling's magazine. I finally read it, so I actually have it bookmarked in tabs and all that good stuff. But it talks about like this generation, like they're the first generation to have to deal with active shooter drills their entire childhood, and so it's stuff like that that's like, I think I might have had an active shooter drill. I had a weird trajectory. I didn't go to high school all 4 years, but I might have had one in high school. I know we did some tornado, put the books over your head thing, but I don't recall being like, it feeling so real that like there could be a shooter in my school, and like that's trauma. Even if one doesn't occur, going through that process. And so kind of looping back to like, I think it's awesome that we're talking about mental health younger and younger, because like I think kids used to just be able to be kids for a long time and like ignore those realities of the world. But like starting like Lianna with our generation, I mean, we were in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade when 9/11 happened, and so since then I think it's just been a very different place.
To be clear, I was in 6th grade when 9/11 happened.
Was I? You're
DJ
not that
has
much
no-
older than me. What grade
I
was
was
I
at,
in?
but we talked about that stuff when I was in school, by the way, because I was in 7th grade when the Challenger exploded, and that I will always remember them wheeling in the TV, and so we could watch the stuff. So like we did talk about that stuff even way back in my dinosaur days. If there was a tragedy.
I mean,
But it
I
kind of,
don't recall, like, I don't remember active shooter drills like we do now ever in school. I mean, we literally, like, we practice run, fight, hide. So based on the announcement that is made, like, your adults determine whether we're going to run and leave the building, we're going to lock down and hide, or we're going to get ready to fight in case someone comes in the door. Like, we are holding objects to throw. In my previous district, which now this is 7 years ago, they shot live rounds in our building, not with kids there, but with staff there so that we could hear what it sounded like.
What?
Yeah. And that was traumatic for our staff.
I was gonna say, what type of processing did they have after that? Like,
it was a lot.
oh my gosh.
I mean, there's no word, like, that's just the reality that we're living in, right? And so, yeah, like, I've had to go into kindergarten classrooms to help talk to 5-year-olds about if there's somebody in our building that shouldn't be, and what we're going to do about that. Something that I do as a school counselor, even in my building with 1,000 kids, there is one other counselor, there, but we have like 1,100 kids total. But
in community mental health, we complain about high caseloads. I think most of our caseloads are below 550 though, so I think we're okay. But anyway,
But we do what we call mini meetings. So we want to meet with every single student in the building at least once to like check in and see how they're doing and how is this year going so far. And one of the questions we ask is, do you feel safe at school? And 90% of the kids that say no are literally worried. I mean, it's like 10% or less that say no, but their reasoning, like we then ask why, and their reasoning is because what if a stranger gets in and they shoot us?
Mm-hmm.
And so like kids are thinking about that and they're aware.
I think it's that balance though, right? Because like I mean, taking it back to the top, so there's kids obviously that aren't going to feel safe at school because they're worried about that. And like I know I've been invited to go speak in high schools for a long time to talk about mental health and substance use and all those things. And I always joke like I'm not that person who's going to come in and be like, "Don't do drugs. Drugs are bad." I was like I'm going to talk about like more realities of stuff, but I know progressively how much harder it's been to get into the school, like physically the process I have to go through to get in is it changes over time. But so we have those mitigating factors, and there's always going to be kids that are like more afraid of that. Like that's going to be like a source of anxiety. But I think what you said at the beginning, Lianna, is like kids come to school, maybe the only place where they feel safe, where they have an adult who respects them and addresses them as a human and a person with value, and they come there to eat and have a sense of schedule and routine and all of these other amazing things, and that is in no small part because of supportive teachers, supportive counselors. I mean, like everyone plays a role on making school safe in those psychological ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that kind of ties into one of my biggest things as a school counselor is like, sometimes when I'm like talking to parents or talking to community members and I like tell them what my role is, they're like, "Oh," and there's like this big like stigma on like, "Oh, you're the counselor, like don't
Mm.
talk to my child." And it doesn't need to be like that. It's great that we have counselors in our schools because we really can just be like a teacher's job is to teach. Yet they do 8,000 other things as well, right?
Hmm.
But like the principal's job is to run the school and they're going to handle discipline, but they're going to handle daily things like arrival and announcements and all of those things, right? They're running the building. And so as school counselors, like we are this other person that can one be there to like address those big needs, like when a kiddo comes in, you know, experiencing a traumatic event, we have a place for them to go. We have a person to talk
Hmm.
to. And like I think DJ mentioned earlier on too, like somebody that they've seen, like somebody that says good morning to them every morning. And now I know where I can go. Right. And it doesn't have to be such a negative thing or like it's not a scary thing. And I always tell kids like it is okay to ask for help. Like we all need
Hmm.
help sometimes, whether that's with opening your pudding, tying your shoe, or because your friend just said that they're never going to be your friend again, or because you lost a parent. Like whatever the situation is, it's okay to ask for help. And I think like we're not used to hearing, again, like we hear the term guidance counselor and it doesn't sound as like scary for whatever reason, but it also doesn't encompass like all of our role, right? And then we hear school counselor and we're like, oh, whoa, like hold on, that's too intense. But like it doesn't have to be.
Hmm.
We're just safe people that help create that environment for all kids to feel welcomed.
But I mean, that's it. That's the ticket right there. Is you're changing stigma, because when you're inviting these conversations young to say it's okay to want help and need help, and not just, I mean, like, oh my gosh, we could do a 10 episode series on like gender and like how a lot of don't even get me started, and how that starts really young and how we're socialized and things like that. But I mean, truly just starting the conversation about like there's help. Here it is. It's accessible. It's this caring person. It's not a scary, like, oh, there's something wrong with you if you go talk to Miss Leanna. It's
Mhm.
like, Miss Lianna, oh my God, no, like she's fly. She totally said that my best friend didn't actually hate me because she didn't show up in the matching outfit we planned. Like, you know, or whatever that might be. I don't know what kids these days are upset about. I
Well,
avoid.
sometimes it is little things like that,
Hmm.
right? But like to them, that's a really big deal
Hmm.
because this is their world.
Hmm.
And so, as little and silly as it may seem to us as adults, like in that moment and helping them to navigate that quote little thing is going to could change how they react and get through a much bigger situation in the future.
Absolutely. Yep. Starts with the little things. That's how we learn.
Mm.
So, Lena, to wrap things up, I want to ask you a very difficult question.
Oh boy.
If you could tell parents one thing that would make your life easier or the life of your littles easier, what would you say?
One thing. Is there like a word limit?
No.
Okay.
One, you get 3 sentences.
One big run-on sentence would
Yes.
be, um, I guess first it would be that I love and care about all kids and that all kids deserve to have a safe adult, whether it be you as parents or for whatever reason not. And I guess that, it isn't a big deal. Like, I'm just here to open their pudding and to like listen and make them feel heard. Like, that's it.
The physical and emotional pudding, just like,
Right.
get all
Literally.
your
Yeah.
feelings out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
DJ, any closing thoughts from you?
Oh, I think it's great, Lianna. Thanks for coming today. It's nice to be able to see talk about the school counseling part. And I really appreciated being able to hear just how things have evolved since I'm licensed as a school counselor in Ohio. I've been licensed for 10 years. I haven't worked as a school counselor outside of my internship because I've been in mental health. So it's really nice to hear the way things have changed and to get your perspective on all things mental health.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Mhm.
Thank you. I certainly learned a lot, even if, we're always in conversations about mental health, but there's always space to learn. So thanks, Lianna, for coming on and being our very first guest and sharing your wisdom and your insight and your time with us. We greatly appreciate it. Well, we want to thank everybody for listening or watching whatever platform you are on. Make sure to like, subscribe, rating, comment, whatever. I don't know, all the ways you can engage. I feel like I should have a script at this point, but I really don't. But we look forward to having you back again next week on Let's Pick This Up Next Week. So we will talk to you all then. Thank you again, Lianna. And I hope everybody has a great day.